Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Sure can.
So I just wanted to say that we'll be starting a little bit after 5. It's 2 minutes before 5, but we're going to give people a chance to sign on. So we'll start about 4 minutes after 5. Additionally, I just wanted to remind everybody that is on currently, this meeting is being recorded, so everybody is aware of that. All right, so we'll give it a few more minutes before we begin. Hi, Pastor Alex. Thank you again, Pastor. All righty, we're just giving about 2 more minutes to allow more people to trickle in before we begin. Again, this meeting is being recorded, so everybody is aware. All right, it looks like we are ready to begin. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is, again, a recorded line. Pastor Alex will be our facilitator, so I will kick the reins over to Pastor Alex. I know Mayor Ben Walsh is here, so let us all begin. And thank you, Chief Buckner, for being here as well.
I can't hear the pastor.
So, Pastor Alex, you have been made a co-host, so you can unmute yourself at any time. Okay. I think we might be having a little bit of technical difficulty. So that way, I will kick it off to you, Mayor Ben Walsh, if you want to say a few words.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good evening, everyone. Nice of all of you to join us. We all have a lot going on right now in our lives and in the world, and so appreciate your time on a very important topic. I'm not sure that they're with us this evening, but I want to acknowledge my fellow co-chairs in this effort, County Executive McMahon and District Attorney Fitzpatrick. This is a countywide police reform endeavor, and so we thought it appropriate to partner together on this. Want to acknowledge and thank Pastor Alex for facilitating here. I want to acknowledge my colleagues in city government that are also on the call. You'll certainly be hearing from Chief Buckner. I see Councilor at Large Rita Paniagua is with us. I'm not sure if Council President Helen Hudson is, but she has been very much involved. We have our CRB Administrator, Raynette Relaford, here. I also see First Deputy Chief Joe Cecil. So the city is well represented, and we're here to share information, but more as important, if not more, to listen and to learn from all of you. So just a little bit of background and context. I've been in this position now for 3 years, and coming in the door in 2018. Achieving police reform and improving police community relations has been a priority. And one of the first ways in which we undertook those efforts was through the almost year-long search for a new police chief. That was led by Deputy Mayor Owens, who is also an integral partner in these efforts and unfortunately isn't able to join us this evening. But we had meetings across the city over the course of 2018 and listened to the community. We heard some very inspiring and encouraging feedback, and we heard some very painful but necessary feedback as well. And that ultimately informed our decision to hire Chief Buckner, who again is with us this evening. So since Chief Buckner came in to the position, we've spent the past 2 years really accelerating our efforts on police reform. Chief Buckner immediately initiated a number of important initiatives, including revising a number of our policies, including use of force, and we made steady progress. Of course, over this past year, over 2020, and especially in light of the murder of George Floyd, those efforts came into more focus, not just by this administration, but by the community, and that was consistent with what was happening across the country. And what we heard loud and clear from the community was that what we were doing was not enough, and it was not happening fast enough. And so we have tried to heed that call and to do more and to do it faster. That led to, among other things, the issuance of my first executive order on June 19th of 2020, which included 16 specific actions, many of which aligned with calls from specific organizations and groups, including the 9 demands that we received from Spark and related partners associated with the People's Agenda for Police Reform. Among those 16 items are things like, again, reviewing and updating our use of force and body-worn camera policy, completing the acquisition of our body-worn cameras and deploying them across the force, which we have achieved. A number of other matters, defending the consent decree, federal consent decree on hiring diversity, which we just had some relatively good news on, and a number of other matters. All of those, and I'm going to hit send on the chat, all of those 16 action items are being tracked for progress on our police reform portal. So I included the link within the chat. I suspect Stephanie will also include our county website, which also contains this information. But we want to be as transparent as possible on the progress that we're making. And again, I'm pleased to report we're making progress on all fronts, and we try to keep the web portal as up to date as possible to reflect that progress. But it's an ongoing, fluid process. And again, we acknowledge that there's much more to do. And so, the purpose of tonight is to continue the conversation that we've been having, and to hear the positives and the negatives. So very happy to be with you all. Very appreciative that you have given us your time this evening, and look forward to the conversation.
So I will begin with a small mini presentation that we have prepared for tonight's community forum. So again, thank you everyone for being here. It's vital to our countywide collaborative to hear from you and get your input in terms of police reform and how it should look moving forward here in Onondaga County. So as I previously indicated, Pastor Alex is our facilitator for tonight. He will be helping with making sure we get our comments in and, making sure that everybody can be heard. For tonight's presentation, similar rules to the first 4 community forums. If you want to make a comment, please submit your name in the chat box or press the raise your hand button here that Zoom has. When you make your comment, you will have 4 minutes to make your comment uninterrupted. These are your 4 minutes to say what it is that you feel good, bad, or indifferent with regards to policing here. Tonight's focus is on Syracuse on the east side, understanding that some may have missed their community forum for their particular neighborhoods. You'll still be free to make your comments, but tonight's focus is on Syracuse on the east side neighborhoods. When you do make your comments, please, if you don't feel comfortable saying your name, at least say your zip code. So that way we can track where these comments are coming from. And if you're still not comfortable making your comments here tonight because it is recorded or for whatever reason, you can always submit your comments at nyspr@ongov.net or submit them through our public comment page on the policereform.ongov.net site that I just put in the chat a little earlier. Now, part of the reason why we're here is because of Mayor Walsh's executive order, as well as Governor Cuomo's executive order 203, which calls for a reinvention and reimagining of policing all across the state of New York, and particularly in our agencies here in Onondaga County. So our response to that was to create a county-wide effort that involves all of our agencies, as well as all of our members of law enforcement, from the DA's office all the way down to the smallest areas here in the county. That way we can try to create a plan that is a uniform plan that is the same across the board, or at least has the same pillars across the board, understanding that each police agency will have to submit their own individual plan to Governor Cuomo at the end of this, which our deadline here is April 1st of this year for every agency to submit their plan. And it goes without saying why we are here today. It's because of the incidents that occur, like George Floyd, that we're here today. And we understand that policing and our communities, there's been a clash, right? And so we want to address the issues that are underlying these clashes that we have here, because it's not right for a man to be on video for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And so we want to address these issues. And as I already detailed out, Executive Order 203 wants us to address any racial bias and disproportionate policing of communities of color throughout every agency in every county in every town or village. It is something that must be addressed here through this work that we're doing. And if you want a more detailed viewing of Executive Order 203, please go to the website. Both the Mayor Walsh's order as well as Governor Cuomo's order are on the website, so you can read them verbatim. Executive Order 203 by Governor Cuomo addresses 14 points as opposed to Mayor Walsh's, which addresses 16 points. And you can see them here, and you can also see them in the executive order. Now, when all said and done, this is not the end of your public comments. Yes, we have only one more, which is tomorrow, and that will be focused on the eastern side of Onondaga County. But we are still accepting public comments, and we would still encourage and urge everybody to submit public comments to the nyspr@ongov.net email, or go to policereform.ongov.net and submit your comments that way. And that way we can always get more information. And this is a fluid document. This is not something that's set in stone. So your comments are vital and important to this document and the creation of police reform going forward here in Onondaga County. So with that being said, I will now turn over to Pastor Alex to facilitate.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to all of our elected and appointed officials that are on this evening. Before we begin, I did see County Executive. I thought I saw him come in and wanted to give space if he wanted to say good evening. County Executive, or Stephanie, do you see him on? There he is.
County Exec, if we can restart, you're still muted.
Okay, can you hear me now? All right, great. Thanks for everybody taking time tonight. We've been having these hearings, and it's different via Zoom, but I think they've been productive, and I think people are communicating, and there's a dialogue, and hopefully a better understanding after all of this. I heard the mayor go over and review many of his executive orders, and certainly this week with the progress that was made at the federal level by the federal judge is important. That was something when I was a city councilor that we worked very hard on, was trying to diversify our law enforcement agencies. And now at the county, we still work on that with our probation department, and we're working with the sheriff's department on that as well. So I'm really here to listen, and I've sat in and listened and learned and acknowledge that we have work to do as a community. And I believe we'll get more accomplished if we work together. So thanks for letting me say a couple words.
Great, thank you, sir. As we begin tonight, and as excuse me, Stephanie shared, you're going to have your 4 minutes. When we started, it was everyone sharing, and then we made a pivot turn to include, as Chief Buckner shared, that if you have Mr. Ford in the room and you got a problem with your Ford Explorer, let Mr. Ford do the explaining. So we have the people in the room. so that if they can help bring some clarity to an issue and or to your concern, they are going to do that. Again, you get your 4 minutes of uninterrupted time to share. Again, and as Stephanie did mention, be it good, bad, a comment, a thought, a suggestion. This is about, as it says, an opportunity to be a part of reinventing, reforming, and redefining what policing will look like. It is a process, and it's going to be an intentional effort process moving forward. I would suggest that this is not it, not only in the actual formation of what will be submitted in April, but then the mindset of training, the readjustment of how we carry out policing for the betterment for the betterment of our community. And it is our community. Onondaga County, Syracuse, and all outlying areas are our community. I shouldn't feel any encumbrance of any trepidation when I drive down Genesee Street and drive into DeWitt, nor should I feel when I'm riding down Onondaga Lake Parkway and going to the Village of Liverpool. We should expect that policing is going to be consistent with what we are working together to build. So with that, we're going to get ready to open up. If you are going to share, please put your name in the chat and or raise your hand so that we'll be ready to hear your thoughts and your concerns. So at this time, if you want to share, someone that's ready, you can type your name in and we'll be ready to begin. I usually love silence, but I really want somebody to just go ahead
And Pastor Alex, as we wait for people to put their name into the chat,
Okay.
we do have some pre-submitted public
Right,
comments
we did see
already. So I will start off with these comments that we've had, unless the individuals that made the comments are here today and would like to express their wishes themselves. I did see that there's a Trevor Briggs, as well as a Mikhail Anderson, Susan Rees, Rich Pochowski. Trevor Briggs, do you want to make a comment? I think so. So we'll start with Trevor.
Yes, Trevor did raise his hand. I apologize. I didn't see your hand up. One moment, Trevor, I apologize. And you're ready to go now. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
We can, Trevor, but if you can speak up, your mic is not that loud.
Okay. Is it okay now?
Yes.
Better.
Perfect.
All right. I've been kind of keeping up a little bit with, police reform, and I'd like to share some experiences that have happened to me that have negatively impacted me from the Syracuse it has to do with the policy of policing and with the use of cameras and just how police interact with the community. My mother passed away on February 11th. I found her in my bathroom, and I'm struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. The police have completely not helped me with any of this. They've actually made it worse. When I called the police and they came to move my mother's body from the bathroom to the kitchen floor, they had asked me to go back inside to grab a pen, and I went inside to grab a pen, and they were like laughing as they were taking pictures of my mother's body on my kitchen floor, who I'd found passed away. And that's just like one example of like just the mental effect that certain things that the police do have on people. Like, I don't think that any of that was right. I think it was completely disrespectful. Also, I have questions about the policy with the cameras, because if I want to know, like, you know, who exactly is kind of overseeing this, because if the police are the ones who are overseeing it, it's kind of a conflict of interest, and there needs to be that definitely needs to be addressed. Also, a supervisor at the rescue mission told me that I looked like a girl and he should start calling me Barbara. And I tried to file a report. And when I did this, I was the paper was thrown in my face, and I was told, "Do you think I'm going to turn this fucking shit in?" by the supervisor. And I ended up getting arrested for trying to react to that in a positive way. For you know, I first it was positive, then it was negative. I ended up spray painting the rescue mission window what he said to me in quotes, and I ended up getting tackled by the police. And then, there's another incident, one more of my last instance. I was holding a sign on the side of the road. I was going through some stuff, and it said "Smile, life is great." I was just trying to be positive, and I ended up going to jail because there was a warrant out for a missed court date for me for that incident when I went to jail for 3 days for being attacked by the police after all of that had happened. And I was thrown in the middle of the road and punched in the face 6 times by the police. And when I went to court, the judge told me it was all hearsay, and I was not given any kind of information as far as how to go about even bringing the video evidence into court. So to me, it felt like it completely was, it didn't work. Nobody was giving me advice. The attorneys were scared of the police. The attorney told me that if I want to, he basically told me that I should just not continue to pursue charges against the police because they're going to continue to harass me. And I think police need to stop the whole fear thing, because I think people are scared of the police. And yeah,
Okay.
that's all I have to say. I'm sorry, I've probably spoken a little over.
Trevor, that's quite all right. And I do offer I just put out good feelings for you in the death of your mother. That is very traumatic in and of itself, particularly when they die in your home. It's been 3 years that my mother died in my home, in my arms. So I understand how that just can really affect your life. So with the concerns that you've expressed, the chief is on if he would like to address or give guidance, and or even Ms. Relaford is on next steps so that you can, start some redress on your concerns. I'm sure he will. Chief?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Pastor Alex. Good afternoon to everyone here. Mr. Briggs, if I'm understanding you correct, first of all, I want to echo what Pastor Alex says about sorry about the passing of your mother. I'm sure that would be traumatic for anyone, not to mention it happening in your household. But if I understand your complaint that you raised, you have not filed a formal complaint on the actions of the officers? Or you have?
I went to court for it actually, and I gave up. I was scared. My attorney wasn't helping me. I had filed complaints. There was video evidence. Again, there wasn't even just video evidence from the police cameras, that not the body worn cameras, but the cameras on the street. But a passerby had recorded the incident, and I was told that it would be considered witness tampering had I gone to collect evidence. So my issue is people need to be able to bring the videos up as evidence. They can't just be disseminated and corrupted by police officials overseeing the whole situation, and I'm not trying to attack you, but this is a very real possibility and has been seen in other cases that have been on the news.
Yes, sir. You have kind of two paths that you can take. You can lodge your complaint directly with our Internal Affairs Division, which investigates police officers for misconduct. And then there's a CRV, which is kind of a community piece, and the director of that organization, Ms. Relford, is on here as well. The one thing that I would say to you or any other person that may be thinking that, well, I don't want to complain because it's going to be my word versus the police, or no one's going to take me serious. While I cannot, guarantee you the outcome to a investigation, I can promise you a thorough investigation, and that we will look into that. And the same video footage that I would look at if we were leading the investigation, Ms. Relford also has the opportunity to get that body-worn camera or street camera information as well, if you feel more comfortable with the community avenue. But none of it can really be addressed unless we have you come forward to get the details about what you're alleging. Lastly, before Raynette may have something for you, our officers that have some training, we have some certified officers that have the crisis intervention training, which is called CIT is the acronym. Each year, we are increasing the number of officers who are certified to dealing with individuals who are dealing with PTSD, dealing with other mental episodes that may be going on with their life. So that number is increasing for us. Our goal is to get 20% of our workforce certified in that. Each year, we probably get somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 individuals that we add to that number because it's a 40-hour-a-week school. But that number is increasing. And we have a private sector partners, one of which is Liberty. And Mayor, if you can give me the name of the other organization that helps us with individuals.
So we have In My Father's Kitchen that does homeless outreach, and in addition to the services Liberty provides to SPD, Liberty Resources is also going to be doing some direct street outreach for us as well.
So those are kind of the footprints that we currently have to at least be able to assist us with some of the issues that you've described today. But you certainly, I would encourage you to come forward to provide your information. And Raynette, you may have something. Raynette, you're on mute. Okay, there you go.
Good evening, Trevor. Good evening, everyone. I would like to echo what Chief Buckner stated in terms of we would really encourage you to file a complaint, Trevor, with our office. I put the information for our office inside the chat function. And I would encourage you to be as specific as possible and start writing down notes as to where these incidents occurred, the time and the place. And if you have information related to the particular officer that would have been involved, then to please start preparing those documents. But it is imperative that you file a complaint as soon as possible. And we would be happy to assist you in any way that we can. We know that COVID is real, but I am willing to meet you somewhere and give you a complaint form. I am willing to mail it to you. I'm willing to email it to you. We want to assist you as much as possible. What we do want to hear from you, Trevor. And I understand your concern with regard to retaliation. And as Chief Buckner is on the line and he will hear me say that, if you feel that that is occurring, we ask that you contact our office, let us know when those situations occur, who the officer is, the time and the place that you feel that that is occurring, and we will both look into that and see what's going on. So I would encourage you to please, sir, Trevor, to please file that complaint. And again, my sincere condolences related to your mother.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have Hassan Rebirth is going to share.
Good evening, everybody. I was talking to some people in the community, and they'd like to express, and I would like to express that the integrity of the law enforcement in our community has dwindled. People can't trust the police. or law enforcement. And I'll give you some examples. And also, they wanted me to address that the penalties for these police officers after they do certain things doesn't fit the crime. You know, it's real minimal, and it's like a slap on the wrist. You know, and if one of the members of the community would have done it to an officer, it would have been a whole nother story. And I would like to give this little story real quick. October 30th, 2017. And this is just an example of what I just said. I gave a party in a building, private party. Make a long story short, officers came, kicked in the door. They took a few people to jail that night. I had like 60 guests inside the building. They took like 5 people to jail. And in the statement, the officer wrote that he was let inside the door. Mind you, inside my building and outside my building, I have security cameras. So one by one, as we were inside the building, the officers were harassing and illegally searching everybody and doing whatever they needed to do. One by one, they unplugged each camera one by one. Now, the reason I got out of this trouble was because I had this stuff on film. Had I not had this on film, I would have been in a whole heap of trouble. Now, I took this video because I had it hidden inside the ceiling, the DVR inside the ceiling. I got out of jail, took this video to the DA and with my lawyer. She looked at the tape, and mind you, the officer had already signed under oath that he was let inside the building. After I showed the DA, she witnessed that he kicked in the door because I had video from inside and out. He kicked in the door, and she witnessed all the harassment and all the 40 officers with green pants come inside the building and raid the building and just do whatever they wanted to. Now, like I said, had I not had that evidence, that video evidence, it would have been my word against his word. That's why my word against the officer's word is not going to be good enough. You understand what I'm saying? Like, because they can say whatever they want to say. And under oath, they will lie. They have lied. And I think that it should have been the district attorney's obligation to go ahead and pursue charges on that officer for lying under oath. Because I think that's a serious charge, especially with everything that's going on in this community. That's a serious charge when you're trying to charge a Black man with a serious felony and lying about it. I think that's serious. That's serious, and I would like that to be addressed by law enforcement and also Mayor Walsh. Oh, excuse me. Might I add, the moral of that story is the officer that had lied under oath, he is now the police union president. You see, these is getting promoted. Officers are getting promoted, and they still doing dirt. You understand what I'm saying? That's why I want the mayor to address that.
So, Mr. Hassan, you said that the case happened on October the 30th of 2017. Did you file a formal complaint about that incident at that time?
I did not. I'm sorry, I did not file a formal complaint. At that time, I did not. No.
At any point, did you file a formal complaint?
No, sir. No, sir. I just wanted to. I really didn't want no problems with the police, so I just really dropped the whole situation.
Okay. Well, it's first of all, thank you for the comments. It's the same thing that we told Mr. Briggs. I understand when there is mistrust. I understand when there is fear. I understand when you don't trust the process. I understand when you don't trust the players at the table. But I can only speak for my administration and what we're trying to do today. You have to give us an opportunity to look into things if we're going to truly get to this mutually desired destination of where you trust our systems. No system is perfect, but I can tell you today that if you file a complaint, we investigate it. You may not always like our outcome or what we give you as a result of that, but we investigate those things today. The part that you talked about with the cameras, we obviously did in 2017, we did not have the body cameras. We have that today. So what would have been a he said, she said 4 years ago, today we have an independent witness to account for exactly what happened. As far as why the DA's office that chose not to pursue perjury charges, that's a decision that the prosecutors make, and we have little to do with that. The other part about the gentleman that you stated that was the center of your complaint, and that he has been promoted to the PBA president. The PBA president is actually elected. It's not a promotion within the police department. So the members of that union vote as to who their leadership will be. So while I understand to you, you go from, what would be just an officer's position to an elevated position of being the head of a union, it's a very powerful position. So in essence, it is a promotion, but it's not a promotion in the true sense of me taking someone and elevating them. That was done through an elected process.
I would only add to that, I wanted to make sure that that point was clear. And again, the election is conducted by officers. So they elect their union president, irregardless of any influence from myself or the chief. Beyond that, just to reinforce the points that the chief said, I think among many things that Chief Buckner brought with him to the department was an increased focus on discipline, and I think you would hear that from both officers and the community. But beyond just discipline, also accountability. We've acknowledged the department's shortcomings when it comes to internal affairs investigations, and Chief Buckner has invested significantly in the internal affairs office to build the capacity of that office so it can timely process complaints. And so we are continuing to make improvements there. And also related to the relationship with the CRB, the purpose of the CRB is to have a process outside of the police department's internal affairs process. But it's critical that we are working closely together. And again, I think we would all admit that there's room for improvement there, but that we've also made significant improvement. And among those improvements is Chief Buckner's agreement or confirmation that investigations conducted by the CRB, the results of those investigations, that he is confirmed and committed to taking those the recommendations that come out of the CRB into consideration when he's making his own disciplinary decisions. So Hassan, fully understand and appreciate your concerns, and again, we are certainly taking them very seriously, and I believe making improvements, but still room to be improved. Thank you.
And lastly, quickly, Hassan, and to also our viewing audience, myself and Renette Relford are going to do a joint community forum here sometime in the very near future to give an update as to where we are with the police CRB relationship. There's no question that there were significant pillars that were not operating as they should when I arrived, and we took responsibility for that. And then more importantly, we began to do things to try to improve upon it. By no means is the process perfect today, but I think that we're both proud to share some of our successes with you that we've had and the progress, and to update you on the to-do list of things that we still need to do in order for the CRB and police to be functioning as we should in that relationship. And I will tell you, both as a chief and a police officer, even though, Renee and I do not always agree on everything, but the one thing that I 100% agree with is that someone needs to watch over the police, because we have too much of latitude when you consider we have the opportunity to take life or liberty from someone. Someone should be watching over that organization. So I subscribe to that. I want to be watched over, because I'm a guy that's going to do what's right, and I think that our community deserves that. So look forward to that community forum so we can discuss that. But you'll see some of the things that have happened in that relationship, so that we can share that with the community.
Great, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Hassan. Next, we're going to hear from Barry Gawanter prior to her sharing. It's great having everyone in the room. Let's hear your thoughts. This is an opportunity, as I've said on our previous settings, to be a part of new, innovative, creative. Share your concerns, your positive encounters, your thoughts of policing. I'll go out on the limb to say, if you say, I think everything is wonderful and great, say that. To your contribution of what your position and your posture is very important. So don't just sit there and observe, join in, participate. Okay, with that, we'll hear from our next person as you are signing in to the chat from Barry. Thank you.
Hi, Reverend Alex. Hello, Chief and County Executive and Mayor Walsh. First of all, I'm speaking as an independent civil rights advocate, not with any affiliation tonight. Tonight's comments started with a comment about officer disdain for people and family members, and that goes beyond disrespect, beyond demeanor. I have heard other complaints over the years about officers demonstrating active disdain for the people that they quote unquote protect and serve. And that is part of the distrust and part of the anger about the conduct of the police in this city. We also heard about fear, and both that disdain and the fear have to be taken into account when you understand why people do not file complaints. It's besides the fact that they don't think anything will happen. They've already been demeaned, or they may feel they've been discriminated against or treated disdainfully, but they are also concerned and have had experiences, and other community members have had experiences when they tried to make complaints to IA, that they were ridiculed, that they were again treated with disdain and demeaning conduct. And that gets around the community. That has to stop. Also, people don't want to go back into the police department to make a complaint, but that's the only way in person to speak about your complaint, because IA is still located in the police department, as far as I knew. The other thing about making a complaint is that people have reported to me that afterwards, the police have attached stigma onto them. They're a complainer, they're anti-police, they are somebody with mental health issues, and it's certainly not phrased in that respectful a manner. And there have been people who have reported retaliation from police after making a complaint. People are afraid of making complaints. That's real in this city. I'd like to know what steps you're taking to address that. That's the first thing. Second thing, in the Executive Order 203, there are several things that I'd like you to help define for people, and I'm speaking about this particularly in regards to the East Side and the South Side. One is problem-oriented policing, another is hotspot policing, another is focused deterrence, another is violence prevention and reduction interventions. Now, I have a pretty good sense what that means because I've been doing civil rights work for a long time, but I'm not sure the general public does. And yet, people on the South and the East Side and the West Side have talked about being targeted for just being present in their own neighborhood or in Syracuse. And I'd like to know how you are going to modify some of those strategies and incorporate a little bit of better demeanor, expectations for avoiding bias-based policing in those types of strategies. The last thing I want to ask about is in the executive order, they also talk about restorative justice and community relations and conflict resolution. And I've not heard a lot of talk about that in these forums. So I'd like to know what you're thinking about in regards to restorative justice and what conflict resolution with police might look like through the CRB or otherwise. Thank you.
Well, the chief's taking notes. I'm going to defer to him, but I do want to. You probably saw us furiously shaking our heads when you mentioned the location of IA, and that was again to the chief's credit. One of the first problems he identified with IA was that its previous location in the public safety building was in and of itself a form of intimidation. So that office since has since been relocated to City Hall Commons on the same floor as the I believe on the same floor, right, Raina, of the CRB, for the very reasons that you identified, Barry.
And how has that information gotten out to the public?
Go ahead, Chief.
Well, I can tell you that we have, I'm pretty sure we put it out online through our website. I've mentioned it a countless number of times in interviews with media, interviews with public forums, interviews with different groups that represent organizations in our city. And they've been there for, I believe, maybe a little over a year now.
Okay.
So it's not like this happened very early when I got here as far as identifying the issue, and then we were physically able to do it. And it just so happened that it worked out that they happened to be down the hall from CRB as to where they were located. But it's been out there in the universe for quite some time.
All right.
Okay. The other things you said problem-oriented policing. So the Syracuse Police Department encompasses some of the other items that you mentioned here in hotspot policing and focused deterrent. So if we look back in the 90s when NYPD had this blanket approach of casting a net on a community, and you go in and you literally stop any and everyone in that area, and temporarily crime goes down. So from a numbers standpoint, the narrative is that we have reduced crime. Here's another part of the narrative when you fish with that net. 95% of the people that you're stopping have nothing to do with the crime to which the community is frustrated about. And NYPD learned that in a very painful way. Our nation learned that. So the agency that subscribe to 21st century policing today, they do hotspot enforcement, they do a focused deterrent, but that is based upon data. So when we gather information with our analysts, which is a robust mechanism that allows us to gather, analyze, and then disseminate that information to the appropriate people, both inside and outside the organization. So what do I mean by that? The officers know exactly where we need them to be. There are 22 territories within our 3 divisions. And when those officers are riding those areas, they know where the hot spots, to your point, are in for their respective territory. So you're going to see their energy more prevalent in those areas where we have more crime, which in some instances on the surface, the unintended consequences of that is if you live in that hotspot location, you may see more of a police presence in that area, but that's based upon that is crime driven. The other part of that is a focused deterrent. We have individuals that we know that are responsible for a significant portion of our crime. And in this example, I'm specifically talking about violent crime. There's about 30, 40 different individuals that we believe are disproportionately responsible for the violent crime that you see in our city. So we try to very keenly focus on those individuals so that we're not impacting other people who have nothing to do with the violent crime going on in the community. So that's a part of our crime control model. The other part of that, when you talk about demeanor preceding me and since I've been here, continues to be the #1 complaint about police. Despite the kind of narrative that you see going on around the country, it's not excessive force. It's not something involving even the use of force. We rarely get those kinds of complaints. The majority of our complaints have to do with how we have interacted with the public, how we've talked to an individual, how they've been treated during our interaction, and we continue to try to work on that. Customer service is obviously a big component of that, and we want to make sure that that is a staple of our training diet. But it takes time to get those things massaged through your organization from a training standpoint. Now, you can immediately set the tone for that through appropriate investigations, make sure that they're thorough, and then accountability when we have individuals who are stepping outside of our value system. If you look at what discipline looks like in our organization today, I guarantee you there is a stark contrast as to what discipline is today versus what it looked like 3 years ago. And the numbers support that. And trust me, the officers know the difference today as to what discipline is. Not to mention, most recently, near the end of last year, we had a well-documented incident where one of our officers shoved the gentleman in the face for no reason. We did the investigation. You saw the copies of the video, and then we notified the public as to what his discipline was to be more transparent, to dispel this narrative that nothing happens to the police. Those are all positive changes in the right direction, so that you know the kinds of things that are happening in our organization when we don't do what we're supposed to do. The last part about that, you talked about community relations and conflict resolution. So when community relations standpoint, we at the end of last year, we announced that Jimmy Oliver would be taking over our community engagement for the police department. Jimmy came from the Parks Department, well-known young man in this community, grew up in our park system, in our community clubs, and as a product of that, his 40, 50-hour-a-week job now is to build bridges where they do not exist, strengthen bridges where they do exist, and more importantly, have a very, very strong focus on the youth in our community, which is where a lot of our issues that we're seeing from a crime standpoint are happening with our juveniles. So we have a number of things that we're working on, but the biggest that you'll see from that community relations, community engagement division is standing up our POW program, which is the Police Athletic League, to give the kids an opportunity to have those constructive contacts with police and to do something with their time so that we can focus on their grades, attendance, and conduct in school, which is a lot for the police to take on, but we understand that there's a significant amount of expectations that are on us, and we think that we can have a positive impact with that. Conflict resolution, obviously, that's something that we talk about in our community, where we want citizens to make the right decisions when we have disputes with individuals. We have a number of different, both formal and informal ambassadors in our community. When you think of someone just like Clifford, who runs the
OGs Against Violence.
Yes, his program there, and Clifford does a really, really good job. And I'll give him one shout out before I close this out. The worst night in our protests during the summer is when our building sustained significant damage. There were other people that assisted Clifford, but one of the first people to grab the young men who were busting out our windows was Clifford. That's conflict resolution. Putting himself in harm's way in a very tense moment, a citizen stepped in between police and those young men who were causing that. And those are the kinds of things that we need to put our resources with organizations like that, so that we can kind of be a force multiplier for the things that he's trying to do. That's it there, Pastor.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. And additional information, of course, can be followed up if necessary. All right, we're going to hear now from, excuse me, from Albert Tubbard. Albert?
Hi, thanks, Pastor Alex. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. So first, I have a question about the committee process going forward and how we address all these reforms. I want to know how we can be involved in those committee processes, how people can watch and track everything that's happening so that they can be informed, so that they continue to have input, because frankly, 4 minutes isn't enough to get through everything. The second thing I would like to point out is we were talking about how IA has been moved from the Justice Center, and how did people get informed of that? And the fact of the matter is we have to reach people where they are. Not everybody's sitting at their TV watching local news. They might be on their phones and whatnot. So maybe we should have some process of outreach to the community to let them know that they can make a complaint, that we're making changes to the complaint process by dropping letters at their home, giving information directly to the people, instead of saying, well, we put it out into the ether and, you should know by now, because that's just not how things work today. The other thing I would like to say, and I said this last week during the county meeting, every city, every state likes to praise that, we're the first in the nation to end cash bail. We're the first in the nation to have independent redistricting happen in our city. I want to ask this city and I want to ask this county to be bold and to come out and say, we're the first in the nation to address housing insecurity. Because when you talk about hotspots and focused deterrence, you're talking about neighborhoods where kids and young people are fighting over resources. They don't become criminals because they're messed up in the head. They become criminals because they're looking for resources. They're fighting over a limited set of resources that they don't have. the police department keeps getting resources, keep expanding their budgets over and over and over again. And, you know, we have to address the rise in crime, but the rise in crime is directly correlated to the increase in poverty, right? To the increase of not being able to know if you're going to have an opportunity to go out there and make something of yourself, right? So you're just left in this position where, well, I need money to put food on my table. So what am I going to do? I could sell drugs. That's easy enough. Then you ask, why do all these kids have guns? Maybe it's because they live in dangerous neighborhoods. Maybe it's because they fear for their lives. And instead we should be focusing on making it so they don't have to fear for their lives, you know, so that they have a secure housing, right? So that they're not living on the street, or they don't have to worry that they're going to be out on the street tomorrow. And maybe not having a concentration of poverty over 40% in some neighborhoods, you know, because some of that resource sharing can all come from the government because you have a limited budget. But, you know, if a poor kid lives next to Mr. Walsh, you know, you might be able to help raise that kid. You know, they need somewhere to go for dinner. You can feed them one night, you know, or maybe their parents couldn't afford to buy them an Xbox, but your kid's got an Xbox, and they can come over and have a sleepover at your house and play Xbox with you. You know, like that's a big portion of resources that we tend to not think of that's getting left behind. And instead we keep focusing on how many more police do we have to throw at the problem? How many more people do we have to throw into jail? You know, how many more people are we going to keep doing this to, when what we should be focusing on is lifting people out of poverty so that they don't get forced into that corner where the best possible option is to sell drugs, is to get involved in a gang for protection. Thank you.
Mr. Tubbert, thank you for the question and your comments. I agree with you on the getting information out. I will tell you that one of the things that I certainly recognized probably at some point near the end of last year, and that I try to keep my finger on the pulse, is that we do a lot of really, really good things that no one knows about. And that's our responsibility. And I've talked to our folks about the need to do that. And a lot of times it's difficult to get our officers to participate in it. I'll just be quite frank with you about that. But we have an Office of Public Affairs that I created when I arrived. The relationship that we have today with our media outlets is a productive one. And I think it's a mutually respectful one. But there are also avenues that I think that community engagement with Jimmy Oliver, getting us into other areas where we don't have those communication pipelines for some of the things that are going on in our community to get that word out. I will tell you that each of the 3 divisions, there's a citizens advisory group for each of our 3 divisions. We send out a lot of information through those 3 organizations. If you're not participating with one of your community advisory groups, I encourage you to reach out to them and to talk about maybe joining their group, or at least get in their email tree so that when we're sharing information, you're getting that information firsthand. Many of the issues that you talked about as far as police being the first responder to something, that when you really look to the root of it, back to Barry's point, when you talk about problem-oriented policing, the first thing you want to do is get to the root cause of some of these issues. By the time crime comes to the surface, many of the pillars of our society have already broken down before crime comes to the surface. So I'm in agreement with you that the police should not be the first resource that we drop in on many of these issues, which is why we have the relationship with the school system, which is why we have the relationship with these mental health organizations, that we're now doing a co-response. And we put it out on our media outlets. There's been a countless number of times this past year that we've talked individuals literally off of the ledge from jumping off of bridges or from high points and other places that they're doing that, or where they went with us and to be the first responder, and we stand in the background, or where they're negotiating with someone who's attempting other modes of suicide. So we're getting there. And as far as reimagining what police can do in our community, it's going to take some very broad thinking on our part and getting out of our own way. And then also some of this, we may have to redirect where dollars once went. They may be going into new areas so that we can do some of those things, and we're not turning poverty into a pipeline into prison. So we recognize that. We agree with you in many instances about it, but it's just going to take us time to get there. But we do have measurable things that we've done in the short term to say that we're headed in the right direction.
Great, thank you, Chief. Peter, you are next. If I could share prior to you coming on, we've often heard, and even most recently, about a number of our young people going to the mall on Saturdays or on the weekends. With the efforts that the chief and the mayor with Jimmy Oliver and putting together the Police Athletic League and offering them some place to go, getting them involved. Again, that is a way that we can help our community be a better community. That the police are saying, we don't want to see our young people in the mall and getting arrested and calling parents. Let's give some alternatives. And they alternatives to getting in the system. Poverty, as the Chief just said, poverty does not mean that someone should have to become a part of the criminal justice system. So it's going to take us some time, but there are most definitely some things that can be done, and the redirecting of those allocation of funding so that we can do some of those things. That's what it's going to take. We are better together. So Peter McCarthy, you are next, sir.
Thank you. My name's Peter McCarthy. I am on the Citizen Review Board. I was the chair for a little over 2 years. I recently finished my term as chair. And Lori Nielsen is our new chair. She's on the call, and she's agreed to address the question of the purpose and function of the CRB for the group. So she'll be on in a few minutes and can do that. I just wanted to emphasize the importance of everything that Barry Gawanter had to say. I think Barry did an excellent job of describing the pervasive feeling in the community that the police department, for a very long time, has not acted like they're there to serve the community. And I appreciate that the chief has been making efforts, and I agree with many of the things the chief had to say about the changes that he's been making over the past couple of years. The chief, I've had numerous conversations with the chief about that. It takes a very long time and a very concerted effort to change community perceptions. People don't report stuff. Trevor didn't report, Hassan didn't report, for the reason that they feel nothing's going to happen, that they'll be treated badly, that they may be threatened, that they may suffer retaliation. People tell us over and over that the officer got out of the car, and you get the feeling that the officers feel like they're walking into a combat zone every time, even if there's not an incident of conflict going on, that the officers treat them consistently like they're the enemy. And as Barry said, they're treated with disdain and they're treated in a threatening manner. I understand the chief's position that he's working to change this. The main point I want to make is that that's a very deep perception in the community, that that's how the police treat people. And it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of concerted effort with the efforts that the department are making. Last thing I want to say is really to the mayor and the county executive as much as to the chief. And the chief just alluded to this. There need to be other services available quickly on demand when the officers find themselves, or when the 9/11 call indicates that there might be something other than a threatening crime situation going on. There might be a person that needs help. And we don't have in place the services to deal with those. And it puts our officers in a tough position. And sometimes they don't handle it well. But there should be a better way to have first responders who are equipped to deal with people who may be in emotional or mental crisis, and not have the police always put in that position. I understand these forums exist to get input from the public. And so I'm trying to report what we're hearing from the public. I know Barry was doing the same thing, and I would encourage the commission that's taking these to write down every word that Barry said and take that very seriously. Thank you.
And if I may just briefly answer what the remaining question that Mr. Tolbert had in terms of being a part of the committees that we have here, and what to proceed going forward. So the committee started off with the co-chairs of Chief Buckner, Helen Hudson, President of Syracuse Community Council, Common Council, Chief Conway, Chief Michael Crowell, and Linda Irvin. And they were given free rein to select their committee members. So what we'll do is we will be taking note of those who would like to join our committees, and seeing and bringing those names to those co-chairs. As it pertains to what's going forward, what's going to happen is we intake your comments. We will submit a draft plan, which would be posted to our website, and then we'll be taking more comments on the draft plan. So it's just a matter of right now waiting to see what the draft plan would look like. And
Can't hear you.
we have a Karen N next up, and I will get her on.
Karen, one moment. Lori was going to shift from, if I'm correct, Lori's coming and then Karen. Yes. Lori?
Okay, thank you. I don't know if there's any specific questions, but in general, the Citizen Review Board reviews complaints against a Syracuse police officer or officers. The board is made up of 11 members who all live in the city of Syracuse. We are volunteers. Rainette is the administrator. She is the paid staff and the only paid staff who is doing all the investigations. Anyone can make a complaint either, as the chief said, through the police department or through the Citizen Review Board. Investigations will be done concurrently. Any complaint that comes into the CRB does get sent to the police department and vice versa. The appointees to the Citizen Review Board are appointed by the city council and the mayor. We serve 3-year terms, 2 consecutive 3-year terms, and then need to be replaced. We do the investigations. The board meets publicly the first Thursday of every month at 5:30. When we're not in COVID, we meet at City Hall in council chambers, and we have been doing WebEx meetings, and you can get the link to that at the city webpage. The Citizen Review Board has a Facebook page. Even though the offices are not technically open, phone calls go directly to Rainette's cell phone, so you can call at any time and she'll get back to you if she can't answer right away.
Thank you, Lori. Appreciate that. Okay, Karen?
Hello. I see you, and I did want video, but don't worry about it.
We can see it.
I had,
We can see.
okay. I had submitted a question previously, and I'm actually going to expand it with another one. Part of changing the attitudes that people are complaining about has to do with how you recruit. Start right at the root. So obviously, we could hope that you folks have built in a process for trying to pick up racial bias in a recruit and a tendency toward the use of excessive force. And having had our insurrection, there's a third one now, membership in extreme groups and believing in the principles of some of the extreme groups. That would be very hard and expensive, and I understand that, but it's a way to start at the root of who you bring into the force. So that's basically a comment and a slight question. Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you for the question and comment. I can tell you that 2 weeks now, we had individuals from the Department of Justice in the COPS office who sponsored a grant that allowed for 2 independent consultants to come into our city, and they're doing a top to bottom assessment of our hiring, recruiting, and retention process. So they're going to look at every aspect of how we hire a police officer. And then it'll take about 60 days, and they'll give us kind of a roadmap of the things that we need to do so that we're reflective of 21st century best practice, our overall process. I can tell you that the incident that you referred to, it happened at our state capitol. That was probably not probably. I think that was from even from a distance standpoint, it was probably the first time that I've second guessed my profession. And I'm a guy that grew up wanting to be nothing but the police. And after watching that incident, part of me felt a bit naive that maybe that I have not believed, accepted, or in some regards ignored some of the things that are in our profession. Because what we saw on television with what happened at that state capitol should disturb anyone. Now, obviously, as it is with anything, there are many officers that were there that did their job and they tried to do their best, and it looks like they were ill prepared. That I think you have to put at the feet of leadership. But there's no question that there were people who were there acting in concert with people who were breaking the law. And when you have that happen in our nation's capital, it's very easy to broad brush out and say that this is probably something that's happening across the country. And I don't think that any objective, intelligent person could dispute you on that. So what I have to do is to try to make sure, to your point, to make sure that we're hiring the right people, make sure that we're recruiting the right people. And that may mean smaller classes, and it takes us longer to get to our fully authorized strength. But I would rather move forward with the right people than to see something like we saw in our nation's capital, because I wouldn't want that for my profession, and I certainly wouldn't want that for the organization that I lead.
Thank you, Chief. I'd like to go on record of saying, Chief, I really appreciate what you just shared. I do, man. That really, I appreciate that. Thank you. Don't know if anybody else is thinking that way, but to share from that place, as you said, you police, that's what all you knew. And to share your thoughts on how Syracuse needs to be very pragmatic and intentional about policing going forward. I appreciate those comments. Next, Mariana.
Thank you, Pastor Alex. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So I'm a physician. I'm a Syracuse resident. Still want me to put my zip in? Oh, okay. But I'm on the east side of Syracuse. My comments relate to the many facets of the public health crisis. That is systemic racism as they relate to our community. I don't really wish to have a direct response, but if it creates conversation, all the better. The fact that systemic racism is a public health threat for Black Americans is no longer a question. We shouldn't need studies to tell us this. We could just listen to the many stories coming out of community members who describe stressful, violent, inhumane interactions at the hands of the Syracuse Police Department. I have heard many. My first recommendation is for the CRB to function as a truly independent body. I'm glad that that has come up today, and that the resources, with the resources and the authority to discipline officers. Across the board, we need independent bodies that function outside of the Syracuse Police Department to hold the system accountable. Nonetheless, many studies have confirmed that not only is police violence a leading cause of death for Black men aged 25 to 29, but also that the stressful interactions that Black, Latino, and Indigenous people face with police leads to worsening mental health and high suicide rates. There is also growing evidence that not only do these interactions affect the mental and physical health of those directly impacted, but that entire neighborhoods and cities report increasing levels of stress, anxiety, worsening mental health following high-profile incidents of police violence. And the fear and disdain that Barry mentioned earlier correlates directly to higher rates of stress, anxiety, and worsening mental health. One avenue to avoid the disproportionate violence that those with mental illness face at the hands of police is mental health rapid response teams. The police do not need to be a part of these calls. I recommend looking at cities that have had success, such as the CAHOOTS program in Oregon that has worked for over 30 years, in which a medic is paired with a mental health provider. Every effort should be made to reach out to mental health providers in this community, create avenues of engagement for those mental health providers to provide input and to work to implement a plan that is not controlled by the Syracuse Police Department. Obviously closely intertwined, but not otherwise mentioned here today, is the new Jim Crow era of exponential incarceration of Black and Brown residents. The legal fines, the loss of livelihood and family, the worry and financial stress that goes along with incarceration. We must put an end to the deep-seated racist attitudes in the Justice Center that leads to inhumane actions, incarcerations, and targeting not only of Black men, but also of our undocumented neighbors. Let us not forget how unjust laws that racially profile and target Latinos affect these residents. If we are truly to commit to implementing the executive order, we must do so with the help of continued public engagement and solicit input not only in forums such as these, which are a bit intimidating, but with ongoing participation in venues that are smaller. It is my hope that you will continue to engage the public with true participatory budgeting also. And until the time that all civil servants can be trusted to put justice and the well-being of its residents ahead of political favors and political power, we must continue to demand a completely open, transparent, and accountable process. Accountability is just part of the arrangement that allows for a true and honest process. And while I have you here in closing, it's my hope that the civil servants present here today will also make efforts to address the poverty that Albert mentioned and the unequal distribution of resources and wealth, very evident from the well-resourced suburbs to the city. This is vital if we are to close the gap of health in our city. That will mean not only addressing these items on the agenda today, but when it comes time to provide favors or tax breaks to well-funded corporations or donors, that each of you instead look to prioritize city school funding, city community resources, healthcare for all, and lead remediation that will positively impact the residents of the city of segregated poverty. Thank you.
Ma'am, quickly before I respond, Dr. Kaufman, there was a statistic that you gave of age 25 to 29, that's something about violence. What did you say that statistic represents? You're on mute, ma'am.
That police violence is a leading cause of death in that age bracket.
Okay. So, Dr. Kaufman has talked about a lot of things where police disproportionately have contact with communities of color. And that is of no surprise probably to any of us that have had an opportunity to live in urban communities. Some of that has resulted in, to her point, a disproportionate number of Black and brown people who are in our prison system. For example, Latinos make up about 13% of the United States, and African Americans make up 12%, but they represent 40% of the prison population. So some of that we lay at the hands of a criminal justice system that is delving out what we would say is some kind of unequal justice system and how we deal with the issues that we see. And I can tell you just as a quick slice to that, if we look at how we deal with the pill and heroin epidemic, opiate epidemic today, which was a very popular drug for white suburbanites, we've treated that with care, treatment programs, and we've treated them as victims of their substance abuse. During the crack epidemic, we treated substance abusers as criminals, and myself included. When you arrested someone for possession of a controlled substance, in many regards, they went to prison. Crack was a very popular drug in the African-American community because of its how easy it was to make and how easy it was to access it. So there are many things, and none of which are simple, that contribute to some of these disproportionate numbers. Now, I say this, some of the disproportionate contact of police with Black and brown communities deals with crime going on in those communities. For example, for the age of 15 to 31, and I want you to listen to this, 15 to 31, the leading cause of death of Black men is homicide. Not high blood pressure, not diabetes, not obesity, not cancer, homicide. So of course, we're going to have a disproportionate contact in those communities because there's some very serious things going on there. But that is not a blank check to mistreat people. The problem is when you see with organizations that because you have a reason to be in that area, it doesn't mean that you're there unprofessionally. And yes, there are disproportionate poverty-stricken socioeconomical things going on, but we still don't have to have the kind of demeanor that we consistently see in these complaints going on in those communities. The other part of that crime, when people give you crime data, a number that's often left out is African Americans are disproportionately victims of crime. And when we ask those victims to describe who robbed you, who crawled out of your house that you see taking your television, who hit you in the head at the ATM machine, when we're asked to describe that person, they describe someone that looks like me. So of course, when we go down the street stopping bald-headed guys who happen to be walking down the street, I'm going to say, well, why are you stopping me? Well, you fit the description. How many times have we heard that? But can we do that in a professional way? Can we do that in a constructive way where we're acting in concert with the community, where we're not harming the community at a time that we're trying to solve crimes? Some of these things are unavoidable as far as police and some communities are going to come into contact more often than other communities, but we have to do it in a professional way. I can't control all of the things that draw us to some of our communities. I can and have significant control over how we interact in that community when we are there. That's what we're trying to do. Many of the things that the young lady raised, they're painful truths, but we have to find a strong, professional, productive way to address the issues that are disproportionately impacting our Black and brown communities on a number of different levels.
And Linda, if you can go on and speak to the mental health aspect that many of our commenters have commented on.
Sure, Stephanie, thank you. My subcommittee is dealing with alternatives to the way we handle crimes. And one of the subcommittees is dealing with mental health issues. And they've done considerable study already about some other approaches to doing what we do with these calls. Because oftentimes the call comes in to 911 and no one knows that it really is not a criminal activity. It's not a dangerous activity, but it is a mental health activity. And so we're looking at ways to deal with these things differently. And we welcome anyone to help us with that study. And our recommendation will go in the report that's going to go to the governor. But it's not going to stop there because clearly this is an issue that has to go forward. There are too many times that the police are called. For instance, in Rochester, the young man that was in trouble in Rochester, the police came to him like he was ready to do who knows what, but all he needed was some help. He was having a mental episode. Same thing here in Syracuse. There's a young man over on the north side that they went after at the gas station who was having a mental episode, and instead they went after him as though he was ready to kill someone. And so that can't continue to happen. And so we're looking at those kinds of things, and hopefully we'll come up with some ideas that will be a different way of approaching it for all police agencies throughout this county. And that's the goal. So if you have some other ideas for us, please come and help us. Thank you.
There are several comments that have been added in the chat and/or persons have submitted questions and/or comments. As Stephanie has shared, they all are going to be collected. Also, answers and/or provision is going to be considered to the answers as the report is being written. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who has participated tonight. It has been an informative evening. I do appreciate everyone taking their taking their opportunity, and I consider it an opportunity to be a part of what is going to be our document for our community. As I said in the last setting, and I will share again tomorrow, I still believe that Syracuse, Onondaga County is a salt city, and that it is going to be preserved. It's going to rise up to the challenge, and that we are going to make this a better community for all people, for everyone on all sides of town, the county and its outlying areas, and that because it is in our heart to do it. So thank you all. I appreciate it. Tomorrow night we'll be joining in the eastern suburbs of the county. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you all for your participation in Citizen Review Board. Thank you for being there and providing information as well. All right. And that being all, everyone have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
I will note that our chat will remain open for another 4 to 5 minutes, so that for those who would like to submit comments via this chat, please do so. Thank you, Pastor.